Hello, thank you for joining me for today's video broadcast. Nothing particularly complex. The title about says it all. I've been playing Persona 5 for a good while now. Got Persona 5 Royal when it came out, and I've been excited to give this a bit of a shot. It's a Joker-only Merciless run. The idea is I'm not going to be using any of my teammates, just Joker and whatever personas I happen to have on my deck. And I was going to run through a mini boss battle I came upon here in the first palace, just to give an idea of how that's going to look. Of course, it's Kamoshida's palace, so you end up mostly one-shotting everything anyway. But real quick before I go to that fight, I just wanted to give off some rules and a bit of a general strategy that I plan to take up throughout the course of this run. So, for some rules, clearly I'm not going to be using anybody other than Joker. Unfortunately, you don't actually get the option to withdraw anybody until you reach Madarame's palace, the second palace in the game. So for the moment being, all I can really do with these three is just spam circle and not have them actually do anything other than guard. That's about as close as I can actually get to it just being Joker only until I get the option to take them out of the party. And they will not be armed with anything that can in any way buff Joker or debuff or in any way harm any of the enemies. So, unfortunately, they're gonna be meat shields, but there's not really a whole lot I can do about that. And again, it is Kamoshida's palace, so more than likely I'm gonna end up just one-shotting everything anyway, so it's not gonna be that big of a deal. So I have devised a few custom rules, if you will, that I think should be applied just to make things not completely trivial. The most important is I am not going to be using any DLC personas, particularly Izanagi no Akami Picaro, who is extremely overpowered and would serve to just about completely trivialize the run. And I won't be writing this next one down, but I will not be taking Yoshitsune with me as a persona because he is probably the most busted persona in the game, and again would serve to just trivialize most of the run. Next up, the only items I will be allowing myself to use mid-combat will be items that have to do with my SP. I don't think there's any real way around this challenge without doing something in that regard, because otherwise, like, I'll get to bosses late game that will just require me to hit them so many times with powerful attacks they'll just run out of SP anyway, and I don't really think that's practical. So I will, of course, be allowing myself to use things like LeBlanc coffee, for instance, or maybe Somas, so on and so forth. You get the idea. But I will not be using any HP items. I will not be using any buff or debuff items on myself or the enemy. I will just be using items which boost my SP, just for practicality purposes. Now, that's pretty much it for the rules. It's pretty straightforward. Anything I didn't just name, I am allowing myself to do, which is where we're going to segment into the strategy, which is a little bit raw at the moment, but mostly has to do with my choice of personas. Now, I'm gonna go with these four personas for the most part here. I think I might end up switching or at least modifying them somehow. I'm a few skill cards short, unfortunately, at the moment. But otherwise, here we have for personas. Most of the time I'm going to be leading with Alice, who boasts most of my defensive properties here. Alice is resistant to a couple of different elements, repels a total of 6 of them, drains fire, and is only neutral to gun, and of course Almighty, since I can't do anything about that. Notably, Alice is going to be my trash cleaner for the most part, because I gave Alice her signature move Die For Me and Mudo Boost. That brings Die For Me's high chance up to 90%, so I'm going to be able to clear out mobs that don't have some kind of immunity to curse pretty easily for the most part. I don't actually have access to her trait yet because I'm too early in the game where I would have that. But her unique trait is just die, which takes die for me down to 0 SP used. So I don't need Victory Cry or Invigorate or any SP items for Alice to pretty reliably sustain me until I get to bosses, at which point her insta-kill capabilities won't really work. I'm going to be mainly working my way through bosses with the tandem of Lucifer and Michael here. Lucifer resists 4 total elements. As you can see, he also nulls 3, repels 2, and drains 1, meaning that he really doesn't take meaningful damage unless it's from a particularly strong almighty attack. Now, between him and Michael, I have outfitted them with enough spells to cover every single enemy in the game. The only thing that they don't have when put together would be, I believe, Bless, which I don't need for any particular boss, and neither of them have any gun attacks, which is not really that important. That was one point of contention, is not actually putting Bless on either of these two. I don't really have any Bless coverage anywhere. I don't think that's terribly important, but I could amend that if I find that necessary at some point throughout the run. I'm mostly going to be leaning on Lucifer. In particular, Morningstar is really strong for a couple of bosses in particular. The first one that comes to mind is actually Madarame, where I can just drop a couple of Morningstars on his ruler form. You know, the floating nose, mouth, and eyes. Because and I'll talk more about this later, but I can just drop that on him and kind of be done with it. Whereas with any other power, I'd have to take at least 2 turns, maybe even 3 to kill him off. And my 4th persona is going to be Ishtar here, and this is definitely a raw build. I don't really think this build is completely finished yet, but there's a good bit to like about that. And one thing that does demand explanation is the use of Thermopylae here. Again, I can't show off my traits or anything like that, but with Ishtar, I've equipped her with a trait that allows me to use powers at all times that would normally only be accessible when I'm surrounded. Now, in the context of a Joker-only run, there isn't actually a difference between Thermopylae and Heat Riser. Heat Riser only affects one unit that you target, whereas Thermopylae would affect all of my allies. I mean, again, in this context, there's no difference because Thermopylae costs the same exact amount of SP that Heat Riser does. I guess the main reason I'm leaving Thermopylae here is, I guess, for when I play this game normally in the future, I don't really want to get rid of it for Heat Riser and end up wasting that trait on Ishtar and having to go completely redo her persona later, so I'll just leave Thermopylae on her for now. And I have Salvation. That is going to be how I end up healing Joker if I find myself needing to do so at any point. I didn't really need anything other than Salvation. I did contemplate putting some debuff skills on Ishtar. I'll get to this in a moment, but the item I'm running allows me to constantly put Concentrate on myself, and I have Thermopylae here, so I didn't really need any more buff powers, but there isn't any room for debuff skills between any of these 4 personas, except maybe on Ishtar. I could also say slap a Debilitate on any of my other personas. There isn't really any room on Alice, but I could probably find some room on either Lucifer, Michael, or Ishtar. That's a broad, contentious point that I haven't really come to a conclusion on just yet. But on all 4 of these personas, you probably noticed I have emphasized defensive utility. Every single one of these personas completely repels or is null to insta-kill tactics, which is really important. I want to work Null Fizz, or better yet, Repel Fizz onto Michael, and when I'll have done that, I will have had everybody able to Null or Repel Physical, which is important. That's a really common attacking power for personas in the game. And I don't really have any room for anything to do with psychokinetic or fire here on Ishtar, but in general, I tried to load them all up with as many defensive options as I could. And that was honestly what made Lucifer so appealing, because he naturally has he naturally nulls physical and gun, and had a number of other resistances and draining curse, which made him really easy. I only needed just a few slots for his defensive utility, and then I could dedicate the rest to offensive options. That's what made him really appealing. And yeah, that's it. I've got my offensive presence, defensive presence, and a bit of healing utility. I might turn into more of a debuffer down the road. This is amenable. I might get rid of, add on new personas. You know, I might change up their powers, something along those lines. But this is what I am going into this run with for now. Unfortunately, until I get traits, Alice is kind of useless in a way, because Die For Me still costs 40 SP, which is like just about just about half my total SP at the moment, is because I'm a very low level. So I can't really make too much of a use of Alice yet. One thing I can do with her, and this is where we'll talk about my item of choice, I can take her out, make use of the fact that she repels 6 different things and drains another, and I can kind of use her as a way to meat shield Joker while I put President's Insight on myself, and I can then switch over to Lucifer or Michael depending on the situation, and make do with the boost and let whatever attack I pick fly. And that brings me to my next set of points here, my items. This is a new game plus, so I do have some end game equipment here on Joker. Again, that more or less is going to trivialize Kamoshida's, but it's going to start to wear off around Madarame's, at least for the most part, between the melee, ranged, and protector. At a certain point, the melee and ranged are going to end up being so weak that I end up not using them at all. That's more than likely going to happen around something like Kanashiro's, maybe a bit later in that palace, maybe eking over into Futaba's. Of course, the protector is always important, but the accessory is the real crux of the set here. This is the Ring of Greed, which you get from getting all 3 will seeds at Okumura's palace and then bringing them down to Jose at Memento's, and he will then give you a Ring of Greed, which when equipped gives the user access to President's Insight. President's Insight is basically a combination of Attack Master and a concentrate that you can put on yourself or any of your individual allies. So, of course, its function is Attack Master, which is in itself really helpful. It's a passive I don't have to do anything to get any use out of. And B, this is how I can give myself Concentrate without having to switch personas or take up a very, very useful move slot. As you can see from my personas from earlier, I don't have tons of move slots to give out, so the fact that I can give myself Concentrate without having to use a move slot is really, really helpful. I have considered trading this out for an SP adhesive, because really long battles will really put a strain on my SP, since I'll be the only one attacking. But for now, I think the Ring of Greed is fine. When I get to longer battles, like maybe the boss at Kanashiro's or any boss after that, I might consider switching this out, but for the moment being, it's good where it is, and it's more or less serving the function of making these fights at Kamoshida's pretty brain dead. Now, this is coming at a point in time where I had reached right before the second mini boss in Kamoshida's. It's well after I added An and Ryuji to the team. It is the Archangel you experience in the cognitive version of the gym in the school. And I'm more than likely going to turn up and one-shot him because, again, it's Kamoshida's. But I figured kind of taking the build for a spin and showing it live would help to give more of a hands-on idea of how I'm going to approach the run. I'm going to fight that boss, and then the next time I'll have a broadcast will be right before I go to face Kamoshida. I'm thinking I'm going to just broadcast mini-bosses and boss battles. Might do mementos requests depending on how this all goes, but that's currently the plan, is to just broadcast myself facing important mini-bosses and boss battles. So on that, we're just going to head back to Kamoshida's. And we're going to head to right before that, the aforementioned boss battle. And again, I can't get rid of Ryuji, Anna, or Morgana out of my team. It is too early in the game, and I can't actually take anyone out. So for now, they're just going to be my, I guess, meat shields in a way, just standing there hitting O and guarding all the time.
Now then.
Okay, so there's not really a point in having Alice out, so this is ironically a moment where I kind of wish I had Bless coverage, because this guy is weak to Bless, but for now we'll just stick with Lucifer. There isn't really a need for President's Insight, so we'll just kind of rush straight in.
Wait.
Just as that ape there said, it is preposterous.
Here's going to be our mini-boss battle here.
You knew this.
It's quite possible I end up just one-shotting this guy, but we'll see. Game is going to teach me how to defend myself. Thank you, game, for doing that in a Merciless playthrough. That has animation. No, it doesn't quite one-shot. So we'll just go ahead and guard. And we actually don't have enough SP to use that again, because again, I'm really low level, so we'll just nuke the hell out of him with that attack. And yeah, I'm gonna more or less I'm gonna end up doing that when I reach Kamoshida at the end. And then not too far along into Madarame's, we recruit Yusuke, and I get the ability to actually take people out of my party. And at that point, I can definitively make it a Joker-only run. But yeah, that's how I'm going to be handling the run. I'll be rewriting these rules in the description of this video, and I'll be continually copy and pasting them in future videos. So next time I turn on a broadcast will be right before I go to face Kamoshida. And on that note, I do hope he gets a rather decent following. Thank you, and I'll talk later when I'm about to face Kamoshida.